When I was 13 to 14, me and my friends would sneak out and go hang out with our boyfriends out in the middle of nowhere. We lived basically in the middle of nowhere, so going to random back roads was pretty much our only option for having fun. We would go to this place the locals called the Tunnel. It was just a dirt road with tall trees and overgrown willows on both sides. It was very secluded, so we would go there to drink beer, smoke weed, and make out with our boyfriends. They would always tell us spooky stories of a large black dog that would chase their car every time they went down there at night. They said one time that they went there during the day and saw the dog dead and mangled on the side of the road. The next time they went back at night, the black dog was alive and well and chasing after their car again. I knew they were just telling us these stories to scare us, and I wasn't sure if I really believed them, since I had come down to this place with them a few times and had never seen the black dog. One night, around 1 or 2 in the morning, we were sitting in our friend's car in the tunnel. We had all been drinking and smoking weed. We were all joking and laughing when suddenly the driver whispers, "What is that up there?" I looked and I didn't see anything, so I replied, "There's nothing up there. Your eyes are just playing tricks on you." "No, seriously, there's something in the road up there," he replies. The guy sitting in the passenger seat agrees and said that he sees something too. The driver puts the car in drive and starts slowly rolling forward, and a figure emerges from the dark. A man in shorts is standing in the middle of the road, watching us drive towards him. This is a dirt road in the middle of nowhere at 2 in the morning on a very cold fall night. And this man is standing in the road wearing nothing but shorts, not even shoes on, just shorts. "What the fuck is he doing?" the driver says as he pushes on the brakes and stops the car. We all stare for a moment at this man just staring at us. His eyes were glowing like deer's eyes do in headlights. I've never seen a person's eyes glow like that before. We all started freaking out, and then the driver says, "Fuck this," and starts driving forward, fast. The man just keeps staring at us until we get about 10 feet away, and then he just calmly walks to the side of the road and vanishes. There was nowhere for him to go. There was 6-foot-tall fences with willows overgrown over the fence, making the barrier at least 10 feet tall. No human man could have cleared all of that. I still can't explain it to this day. I was hiking in the Catskills. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I come to the Catskills fairly regularly throughout the year because sometimes the Poconos just gets a little boring. I started at the trailhead parking lot where I parked my car and began walking up the same trail that I've walked up 1,000 times. After about an hour, I started to feel kind of weird. I felt like the woods were a little bit quieter than they usually were when I had come up here before, but I wasn't initially very concerned about it. After I sat down to have breakfast, I started hearing rustling above me, and some sticks fell down right beside me. I wasn't really worried about this either, as I just assumed it was some squirrels running around, or some chipmunks throwing things at me. This has happened to me before. I finished my breakfast without incident and kept walking around the summit. This was fairly early in the morning, around 6 a.m., so I would think there would be a lot of birds chirping and a lot of other activity, but things just kept getting quieter and quieter as I ascended. This definitely creeped me out, but I tried to push it out of my mind because I've already been hiking for a while at this point, and I'm definitely not turning around. Eventually, more sticks fell to my right, somewhat close to me, and they sounded heavier. These were not the kind of small twigs that would generally fall from squirrel activity. I went over and checked them, and these were fairly substantial. This continued to happen in a higher frequency until I finally reached the end of the trail. On my way back, it happened continuously, increasing in frequency as I descended, until suddenly it just kind of stopped when I was about a mile from the car. When I finally returned to my car, I found all of the doors open, and it seemed like a lot of my stuff had been very violently rummaged through. I had a bag in there with some of my clothes in it, and this had been torn up. A lot of my clothes were outside of the car, leading back into the woods. I thought about calling the police, but I live in Philadelphia, so I knew there wasn't really anything that was going to happen. To this day, I still get freaked out when I think about it. I don't necessarily think it was connected, but I do feel really uneasy about both of these things happening at the same time. Then again, maybe I was just robbed. So I used to work as a security officer. I was asked to work a Saturday night shift at an old warehouse in Dudley. I turned up at 5 p.m. where the building was a huge brick warehouse with some makeshift offices at the front. I walked in, took the keys from the day officer, and locked the doors behind him. Everything seemed normal for a while. It was a bit creepy as the building was so old, but I was used to that. Around 1 a.m., I got a call from the warehouse manager. One of his night drivers had forgotten his paperwork and asked me to go to the office right at the back of the warehouse and collect it for him so he can come pick it up. I said fine and headed to the office. The warehouse was pitch black. I had a small torch, but it only slightly lit my way. I walked through until I got to the office door, which was a huge metal sliding door. It made a screeching noise as I pulled it open. As I walked in front of me was the office fax machine, which was blinking, and the paperwork was printed out. I grabbed the paperwork, but as soon as I turned around, I looked to the other end of the office and saw what I can only describe as a dark figure hunched over, shivering. I could hear what sounded like breathing, but like if you were freezing cold. I stood there for about 30 seconds, motionless, staring at this figure. I turned back slowly and closed the door behind me, rushing back to the front office where I locked the door and waited for the driver. An hour later, the driver collected his paperwork, and for the rest of the night, I convinced myself it was just the dark playing tricks with me, but didn't stop me from unlocking the office door or checking the cameras every few minutes. 5 a.m. turned up and I got a knock on the door from the day officer. I handed him the keys and expected him to come in, but he locked the door from the outside. I asked him if he was going in, and he said he doesn't go inside when there's nobody else in, but sits in his car in the car park and waits. I said that's a bit strange. He looked at me and asked if I went anywhere else other than the security office. I told him that I went to the back office to get paperwork for a driver, not telling him about the other part. I'll never forget the look he gave me or what he said then. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Well then, you know why I don't go in there alone then." It gave me chills, but I shrugged it off and just said, "Okay then," and left for home. Safe to say, on the way home, I called my office and requested not to go back there. This is 100% a true story. Back in 2021, my family took a trip to Lake Sanitla in North Carolina, a beautiful lake that's rich in Native American history and surrounded by mountain trails. We decided to go on one of these trails on an overcast day. I'm not an athletic person, and I suffer from asthma, so I was behind the rest of my family by myself. About almost halfway through the hike, I heard my sister yell my birth name, but it sounded like it was off the trail. She never calls me by my real name, just my nickname I've had since I was a baby. It did sound like she was scared, so I was very tempted to run off and find her, but I knew my sister wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go off the trail, even in case of an emergency. I quickly caught up to the rest of my family, and my sister was there with them, resting on some rocks next to a waterfall, chatting away and taking pictures. I asked my sister if she had called my name. She didn't know what I was talking about. She had been talking to our dad the whole time. I don't know what called my name that day, but I'm glad I didn't listen to it. Who knows what would have happened to me? I haven't been to that trail since this encounter. I don't have a clue what called my name. If you're educated on Appalachian folklore, please give me some insight on what happened to me. This happened on a backwoods creepy highway road, somewhere between Georgia and Florida in the 80s. My family has always been a Midwestern road trip family, since Dad does not like flying. When I was a preteen, we took one of many road trips to Florida, and Mom and Dad would both drive for the entire 24 hours, just to stop and eat and take breaks. I've always been a light road sleeper and wake up for anything. The reason why this story sticks with me so well is that it's one of the only times I've seen both of my parents show signs of being scared, something as a kid I never really saw. In the middle of the night, I remember waking up to my parents talking about something in a concerning tone. The windows were open, since we were far enough south now to be out of crappy November Midwest weather. Once I wake up, they both stop talking, so I sit up, thinking that they were arguing or something, and that I stopped it. I look out the window and see nothing, just like trees and fields, the moon and electrical poles, but nothing. No houses, no other cars, nothing. I ask where we are, and my mom actually says, I don't know. So now I'm really like, WTF? I say, are we lost? And they both just say nothing. And then I hear music, like our car radio playing, but it's coming from outside. Just loud enough, like it's the car next to us, but we're the only car on the road. But not loud enough to make out the exact song. It's just music. And my parents are listening to it too, all quiet. So I say, where's that music coming from? And there is a pause, and my mom finally says, I don't know. So I say, is it our radio? And my mom says no. And then suddenly, my dad says, very, very calmly, wife, roll up your window. And my mom practically has a heart attack getting the window rolled up. I went back to sleep somehow, but I had no idea what was happening, and my dad drove faster. On the same trip, we saw a couple with a trailer hitching up a car behind them, but it was hitched up in a way that it looked like an invisible person was driving. My parents thought that was so hilarious, and then redirected any mention of the Phantom music to that part of my trip. So I've never fully gotten 100% of the true story.